is there some point where we've got the harvest right here? Can we change the economics, the value of the product, or the change in the cost, such that the harvest goes farther and farther out? Maybe to the point of infinity where we don't harvest at all.
Lower the interest rate?
Yeah, if we lower the interest rate, that pushes the harvest farther out. The other thing we can do is change the value. If we're adding value in terms of the product. What about if we looked at the value of the forest as it increases and say that it goes up and up and up like that? When you do that, then this curve starts coming way out, and it might get to the point where it's not worth it to harvest. So all these scenarios, when you start thinking about the social values and costs, you can actually play around with this simple picture to be able to explain those types of things. There's a whole schwack of math that goes with this, but we're just going to leave that because it's the story that's interesting. Any questions, comments?
But there's a death phase after that, after the peak. So wouldn't that result in degradation of value of the forest after a certain point? If we harvest it or not, it would degrade anyways.
That's a good point too. There are forests that are actually dying and trees have fallen over. If you talk to some ecologists, those areas have tremendously significant value because of animals that require, like woodpeckers and certain owls live in dead trees. The trees actually have to be dead before they use them. So if you can calculate the environmental value, then the dead forest still has value.
And what about fire and so, like insects as well?
Yeah, depends how you view fire. My research has all been in fire economics, the economics of wildfire, and that changes, like it changes from a business perspective. What is the risk? We haven't included risk here. If we include risk, we would actually change the interest rate, right? That's the cost of time. If you have to wait longer and there's inflation and risk, then what this does is increase the interest rate, and it means that you'll harvest sooner. Biologically, fire is really important. For the last 100 years, we've been saying fire is bad, we should put out all fires at all costs and great expense. But now the thinking has changed. You need fire to propagate certain species. You need fire to create browse for moose and various other things that's not woody and shitty tasting. It's nice fresh browse. So fire has value and fire has a cost. So it's tricky to handle. Okay. So those of you signing up for forestry, you can use this to talk about environmental values. You can talk about risk in the forest. You can talk about trade-offs in terms of, do we use the forest for the trees or do we use the forest for the wildlife, hunting, other types of things. Okay. Question? So if we manage forest land in perpetuity, just one more thing, over time, this is what we would have. We would harvest up to a certain point and then cut it down. So harvest one. And so this would be the rotation, first rotation of trees. And because of the soil and the nature of the site and everything, you would likely, if that was the best available option, you would do the same thing. R2, R3, into perpetuity. So the question raised about doing something else, when the value of this changes, that's when you sell the land and you either do tourism or pave it or, whatever. So that's what the infinite rotation would look like. And you would calculate the value of that in perpetuity. Okay, get rid of this. So that was forestry. We'll do the second one is fisheries. Let's say these are marine fisheries. Just I'm going to use time again. And we're going to look at the fish stock. So, at this point, we have SO, which is where we have no change in births and deaths. Okay, so this is the maximum population. So you could say births equal deaths. And this will be quantity. So you can think of it in terms of yield or fish stocks or whatever. It's typically for one species because the species change. They will have different growth curves. You can look at an entire fishery and you will see the same type of curve when you average in all the species. So here's the maximum growth rate. Again, this is where the growth of the fishery, the growth of the stock, so the increase in population is maximized. So you have maximum growth. This is where you have the biggest fishery. You have the most fish, the most weight of fish, right? So we're looking at the growth rate of the fish. And what we want to know is how much do we harvest? Right? That's the ultimate question. So what's the maximum sustainable catch? This maximum growth rate is also called maximum sustainable yield. MSY. Like I said, the numbers are all the same. They tell you the same things. We just call them different things. So if we were to harvest at this rate, we can harvest as much as possible. It's the fastest growth rate. So we could harvest whatever the growth was every year and not reduce the stock to zero. But that is just a biological point of production. This just describes the population dynamics of a particular fishery. It does not describe the best place to harvest in terms of cost, because you have to consider the cost of boats and nets and licenses and all that kind of stuff, or the price or the value of that particular stock. So what we want to do is make sure that we don't fish to the point of extinction, but maximize the profits in the meantime. Okay? So MSY is a biological point of production. Okay, so we're going to change the picture a little bit. This is how the fishery performs over time. And what we want to do is put quantity down here. So we'll put stock, or we can think of it as the population of fish. And we can measure the incremental growth. So we get a similar picture, looks like this, and it does go to 0. We can have a declining fishery, the Grand Banks of Newfoundland, where the fish stock is plummeting and is not going to rebound because there's not a sustainable population to provide enough birds to keep it going. So this point corresponds with the maximum sustained yield. And we can just arbitrarily pick some point of harvest. So if we make the harvest equal to the incremental growth, we have, we call it S1 and S2, and this is the stock.